I am Jeff Chang. I'm policy and advocacy advisor with AAPI New Jersey. AAPI New Jersey, for those of you who aren't familiar, we were founded in 2021 to advocate for the rights, representation, and visibility of New Jersey's over 1 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We advocate for everything from voting rights to domestic workers' rights, language access, immigrant rights, and other protections that enhance the lives of our communities and all marginalized communities. We like to host these casual monthly lunch and learns. I'm sure many of you are having lunch right now, so feel free to continue on with your lunch. We also like to record these sessions for our members. So if you would like to not be on camera, feel free to turn off your camera right now. And we just would like to ask everyone to mute themselves while our presenters are speaking, and we will have Q&A at the end. This is a really important lunch and learn that we put together, and we want to thank the SIG Coalition for joining us and really, their leadership, on this and bringing us into the fold. The freedom to read legislation has been on our legislative priorities last year, and this year continues to be. We have a vested interest in this legislation, in particular because of our work in schools and community as part of our Teach Asian American Stories initiative, which implements New Jersey's landmark AAPI curriculum mandate. As part of this initiative, we provide schools across the state with books that will represent the intersectional diversity of not just our community, but other marginalized communities. And sadly, the very books that we promote in our schools are increasingly, under threat. We recognize the need to work in solidarity and in coalition with others to make sure that, all kids feel included and see themselves in the books they read. And I'm so grateful that we have such wonderful guests joining us that have been doing this work for several years now. I'm really happy that we're going to be joined by Mary from the New Jersey School Association of School Librarians, Rosalie from the Sweep Coalition, and Harmeet from the SIG Coalition. And I will ask them to introduce themselves when they come on. But first, we're going to pass it over to Mary from the School Librarians Association to talk more about this issue and why this legislation is so important. So thanks, Mary. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff, for this opportunity today. We really appreciate picking up another partner in the Freedom to Read bill. Our president, Beth Rath, is also here today, and she will be jumping in and adding to some of my comments today. We are the New Jersey Association of School Librarians, and we represent school librarians throughout New Jersey. There have always been issues of censorship and potential book bans. However, in the past 4 to 5 years, the attempts to ban books have become more it's a new type of censorship and harassment for school librarians. And some books in topic racism, sexual gender identity, and expression. What is from some of the censorship issues become personal, then calling and New Jersey student learning standards and New Jersey mandates. For example, there is, a mandate on the LGBTQ curriculum. So some of the harassment is librarians are simply doing their jobs. They're providing support for students. They're providing supports for curriculum and New Jersey student learning standards. The bill originated with Senator Andrew Zwicker in Legislative District 16 back in 2023. I believe it's 2023. I'm losing track of how long we've been working on this bill. He heard Martha Hickson, one school librarian who has been particularly harassed in her school district. And he was inspired to put together a New Jersey version of the Freedom to Read bill, which was based on an Illinois bill. However, at this time, I really encourage everyone to look at the newest version of the bill that was passed by the Assembly. It is very different from what the original bill was. And I have I usually have not seen the type of thoughtfulness that Senator Zwicker and his staff have put into this bill. He has really worked hard to build partnerships and to collaborate with a variety of groups. And I think that's why we have such strong stakeholders. We have the ACLU, NJEA, all the education groups, the principals and supervisors, the Association of School Administrators, Garden State Coalition of Schools have all come out, New Jersey School Boards Association have all come out in support of this bill. The aim of the bill is it's a comprehensive affirmative bill that would protect the right to read in libraries throughout New Jersey. It's using a civil rights lens so that libraries would not be able to exclude materials because of the author's origin, background, or views. And what I think one of the strongest points is that it includes all types of libraries, not just schools. It includes schools, public libraries, and it attempts to have schools and public libraries develop policies to guide selection and to guide challenges so that there would be a set of policies in place for the community and for the public to be aware of how books get into the libraries and how books would then be challenged to potentially be taken off shelves. I'm sure everyone is aware that the number of challenges for books have increased dramatically. The American Library Association has tracked this type of data, and the number of book challenges has surged 65% in 2023 compared to 2022. There are some key trends. There are a number of pressure groups that are driving some of this. There are multiple titles being challenged at a time, and they're trying to some of the challenges are just trying to silence certain groups of people. In New Jersey, the specific trends in New Jersey, it appears that some of those challenges are targeted to some of the conservative areas. The challenges are, of course, are driven by the extreme right and outside groups. And again, I think one of the biggest changes is they're personally directed at harassing librarians with name calling and scare tactics. They're very angry, even when, we saw in the Assembly Education Committee, even when they were shown that some of what their concerns were for the original bill were not there, they still continued on in their angry tirades at that hearing. It was a very, very long hearing. But at the end of the day, we were able to get it through the Assembly Education Committee and then the full assembly in June. So we are hoping that the bill will be held or heard by the Senate Education Committee in September and potentially moved before the end of the year to get it over to the finish line. And The impacts, when you talk about empathy, children learning empathy uh, is often shared through stories. So students need to, and children, adults, they need to be able to see themselves in stories, but they also need to be able to read stories of others' experiences so that they can develop empathy. Um, the mental health crisis among teens has been growing, and I can't help but think that some of it um, uh, is related to the the potential censorship in some of our schools and public libraries. Um, we we see the bill as recognizing the freedom to read as a human right. It's constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, and it's designed to provide examples of model material selection and reconsideration policies for both public and school libraries. It would set some standards so people would know, and there wouldn't be such an outcry, and books wouldn't just be pulled from the shelves, either in schools or public libraries, because of one person didn't like that particular book. Again, we want to thank all of our partners in this process. Sweep NJ has been a tremendous partner, and the Sikh Coalition. They had a student who testified at the assembly, and we were really grateful to have that kind of support. And we look forward to working with the group, the other groups, again, to move the bill forward in September. I did send Jeff some supporting documents that he can share. We have some talking points that we have all been using so that we're speaking with a consistent voice. We have a document that talks about the process of how books enter the school library. And I will share also the book challenges. We have a whole document on how to deal with book challenges. And we have a document on the New Jersey student learning standards and how school libraries support those New Jersey student learning standards. Thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Mary. And it really takes a coalition, and I think we've been so happy to see such a broad-based coalition that is, supporting this legislation. Civil rights groups, parents, school board members, really, across the board. And we've been so impressed by learning more about the different groups involved, including the Sweep Coalition. And Rosalie, happy to turn over you to talk more about what those advocacy efforts look like.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me? Hi, okay. I'm gonna try to run fast because I have a lot to say, but I'll start with what is Sweep NJ, a little bit about myself, and then how we intersect with Freedom to Read Act. So SWEEP stands for Suburban Women Engaged, Empowered, and Pissed. We are modeled and inspired after Sweep by Red, Wine, and Blue. If you're familiar with the national group Sweep, if you're familiar with the national group Red, Wine, and Blue, you know that they had Heather Cox Richardson speaking for the 7th time last Monday, and they had 70,000 people on that webinar. So there is really an amazing, coalition and coalescing of people that just want to get involved. So Sweep New Jersey, what happened? So let me back up. Red, Wine, and Blue was founded in 2019 by Katie Paris in Ohio. She realized that she was basically a blue dot in the middle of a red area, but she thought she must have other people who feel the same way she does. She went around Ohio and formed a group called Red Wine and Blue. Basically, it was a lot of suburban women drinking wine, talking about like, oh my gosh, what do we do with Trump? What do we do? How do we navigate this? So also at the same time in Kentucky, a woman was forming a Facebook group called Women Against Trump. And she went to sleep, and the next morning she had about 200 members on her Facebook group. So they ended up combining, and now there are little over 220,000 on their Facebook group and about almost 500,000 across all mediums across the nation. Now, let's bring us to New Jersey. So a little bit about me. I have never been political. I always really trusted that our government would run the way it needs to run and that they believe in democracy. And I never paid attention until I saw children being shot in their classrooms. And this is what I do. I explain to people, what is your why? What made you finally get out of your seat and go, I don't care. I need to do something. There's something I have to do. So when Sandy Hook happened, I didn't become active then because I figured something would happen, but nothing happened. So then Parkland happened. So finally I said, I'm going to join Moms Demand Action. I joined Moms Demand Action. Then George Floyd was murdered. So, okay, something bigger than just guns is happening in our country. So I pivoted and joined Red Wine and Blue to find out what's going on here. They have an amazing series every Tuesday night called Sweep Salon. And I basically spent 2 years in COVID going every Tuesday night to learn, like they had PEN America, Southern Poverty Law Center speakers, they had Florida Freedom to Read speakers, they had speakers from the entire country. They had Kamala Harris come on and say hello. They had Mallory McMorrow from Michigan speak. So such dynamic speakers. And I spent 2 years, and I tell people I pretty much had a master's class in civics by going every Tuesday night. So then they were so successful with forming state Facebook groups. They had one in Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, that they asked for volunteers to start state Facebook groups. So I said, okay, do it. I think I could do it. So if you told me that in 2022, when they asked me to join a state, to create and found a state Facebook group, and I did not do this on my own. I had a wonderful woman, Paige Wolf, was my co-founder, and we got it off the ground. We now have 1,700 members. We have 40 county leaders across 17 counties in New Jersey. We just launched a postcard to get out campaign to get out the vote. We are working with Field Team 6 to do that. So we have so many partners that it really, if you told me this is where I would be now, a year and a half later, I would think, what are you smoking? What's going on there? Because, and I try to explain to people too, like when you think of DEI, think of me. I'm an Asian American woman who had no knowledge of politics, didn't care about politics. Red Wine and Blue gave me the tools. They helped me understand about civics and advocacy, and they gave me a chance to be included and have a place at the table. So I try to explain to people, because sometimes people don't understand. It's like diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're just words. What do they mean? So I try to make it personal for them. Now, let's come up to freedom to read. Now, a big part of Sweep New Jersey is advocating for school boards and for children, because we have a lot of parents, a lot of moms. We had so many parents just say, what can I do? How can I help? What's going on? So we formed allyships, which Red, Wine, and Blue calls it relational organizing. It's the same as what Mary said. You know, you look for the people in your camp who can help, and you can all work together. So NJPAC, New Jersey Public Education Coalition, is one of our close partners, and Action Together New Jersey, TNJ, is another close partner. They are working hard right now to get school board candidates, because July 29th is the deadline to put in people's names. And if we don't have names, the extremist boards are going to get worse. Last year, we were able to hold back the tide, push back, and we got about 60% of our candidates in. But we are not even close to where we were last year with this initiative, and we are scared because we have seen what has happened in extremist school boards. Let me do a little side note. What we see happening is exactly what Project 2025 is doing. This is a mandate from the Heritage Foundation. They want to destroy public education from within. There is no like mincing these words. This is what they're doing. We have seen them doing this since 2020, because I have been on Zoom meetings with women from Florida and Texas and have heard what has happened. So I actually got to see and listen to like the first wave of what was going on in school boards before it came up to New Jersey. And I felt like Chicken Little, because I was trying to explain to people that this is happening, but until it's at your doorstep, you don't realize. I want people, because we are AAPI, I want people to look at PEN America's list of AAPI banned books. Pennsylvania has banned a lot of AAPI books. George Takei's graphic novel about being in an internment camp has been banned, not necessarily in Pennsylvania, but that was one of the first AAPI books banned. So if you think, well, it's not coming here, maybe we're safe, we're safely blue, not happening here, that's not true. That's not true. So, okay, here we have a bunch of members, moms. What can we do? What could we do? So we organize and strategize how to send people to board meetings. This happened all through 2023. And then towards the fall of 2023, I was speaking with Louise Walpin, who is our Director of Advocacy and Organizing. She and her wife, Marcia Shapiro, were one of the lead plaintiffs in the same-sex marriage case that brought same-sex marriage to New Jersey. So she's pretty much an icon. I follow Louise like she knows how to advocate. So I've learned a lot from her. But I said to her, Louise, we have to get the Freedom to Read Act passed. And she happens to be Senator Zwicker's constituent, and also Assemblywoman Michelle Drulis's constituent. And she has a relationship with them. So she said, let me talk to Senator Zwicker. Let's see what we can do. So I use the power of Sweep New Jersey to promote and to activate these people who want to do something. We put out many calls to action. Right now, we're working with Mary and Beth to put out a call to get Senate co-sponsors on the bill so that when it goes back into hearing, they can see, wow, there are a lot of senators already on board with this. The Assembly has already been on board with this. Let's just, the idea of opposition gets smaller and smaller because they realize it's an uphill battle. People want the Freedom to Read Act passed. So when it comes time, right now we're asking people to call their senators, to email their legislators, to say, we want you to co-sponsor this bill. As we get closer to the hearing, we're going to find speakers. We're going to ask for speakers. So there is a process, and we also want people to stay safe. That's a big part of what we do. It's like safety in numbers. We've had members harassed walking out of board meetings. It's difficult. So we have to stay together. We have to stay safe. There are a lot of things I'll post in the chat, but for now, I think I've given you enough, right?
Thank you so much, Rosalie. And we will definitely compile all of the resources that everyone is sending in the chat and send it out to everyone on this who joined the panel, who joined the lunch and learn today. And just to echo, what Rosalie was saying, I mean, this is definitely an AAPI issue. Many of the books that we are promoting that talk about inclusion, that feature Asian American, we're seeing them on book bans, right? And we are also promoting books that feature, there's one book in particular I know that we give to schools, and it features a LGBTQ character. And it's being banned. And we know that when we see, we go out in the community and appear at community events, and we give out these books to kids, and we know how much they love these books, being able to see themselves. So we finally have those books, right? We finally have that representation. So to see that then being curtailed by these institutions, it's really, really, really awful. And thank you so much, Rosalie, for everything that the Sweep coalition is doing, and a really amazing work activating people. I mean, I hope people on the call can look into them and maybe join as well. Finally, before we go into some Q&A and also how we can all take action, I'd love to introduce Harmeet in the SIG Coalition. SIG Coalition, Harmeet can go into more, but we're just such huge fans and grateful for both your national, state, and local advocacy. I first learned about the SIG Coalition many years ago when it was first starting, and really the groundbreaking work it was doing, particularly in New York State and New York City, on anti-bullying, and trying to pass really groundbreaking legislation to protect students in schools. And we're really just so grateful that we can count as a state organization, we can count on the SIG Coalition's national leadership on this. And so I'm so happy that they reached out about the Freedom to Read legislation. And Harmeet, I'll turn it over to you to talk more about why the SIG Coalition is involved in this, and also why this is important to the SIG community and the Asian American community.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Jeff. Really appreciate it, and really excited to be here with you all today. I'm Harmeet Kaur. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the Senior State Policy Manager at the SIG Coalition, based in New York State, but I help support and run legislative campaigns and advocacy campaigns in states across the country. The Sikh Coalition was founded in the days following 9/11, when the Sikh community realized very quickly that our community was going to be or was extremely vulnerable to Islamophobic violence and murder in many cases, and that volunteers from our community felt compelled to organize themselves into an organization devoted to civil rights. Since then, we are a professional organization, a registered 501c3, and we operate across the country. We have staff members who are located in almost every region of the country, and we maintain a really strong presence here in New York State and City, given that our organization's roots are here, and one of the largest enclaves of the Sikh community is located in New York City. Our organization usually kind of likes to think of our work in a couple different buckets. So we have first our legal work that we do. We have a staff of lawyers who, one, take on pro bono cases of civil rights violations that community members have experienced. They will also litigate against discrimination that state bodies are doing against members of the community. We're currently working on cases around workplace discrimination, particularly, and that work informs very much the work that we do on the policy and advocacy team. We have two folks who work on federal policy, two including myself, who work on state policy, and we're always in conversation with our legal team about what kinds of cases they're seeing, what kinds of incidents they are logging from intake forms, so we can have a stronger understanding of what community members are experiencing on the ground. We also work very closely with our education team, who are responsible for building curricula, lesson plans, connecting with educator associations and bodies around the country to, one, circulate Sikh awareness resources that our team has curated over the last 20 years. And two, one of our biggest bodies of education work is around making sure that the Sikh tradition is included in state social studies standards. So we've been able to accomplish that in 19 states and counting. So that's a really exciting little bit of work that we do. The reason why we got involved in campaigns around anti-book bans and the freedom to read, particularly, is because the Sikh community is no stranger to the issue of censorship. Our community has historically here in the US and abroad experienced censorship from a government level, from an interpersonal level, from a community level. We're also very mindful of the fact that this year is the 40th anniversary of the genocidal violence that the Indian government committed against the Sikh community in 1984. And that during those campaigns of genocidal violence, they were censoring Sikh community members, Sikh writers and reporters, and in the years since 1984 have censored content about that genocidal violence. And so the issue of censorship is very close to home for us as Sikhs. There is at least one Sikh author who has been banned in several states. Rupi Kaur, who's a poet, an Indo-Canadian poet, her work has been banned in several states, not necessarily for her Sikh identity, but for themes around the honesty of her experiences with sexual violence and sexuality. And primarily the reason why we have really embedded into this work over the last several months is that our organization operates under an intersectional lens. And so we understand that banning books from any marginalized or minoritized community will directly impact the Sikh community. We know that ignorance in childhood can breed animosity in adulthood. We know that children who are exposed to stories and characters of many backgrounds are likelier to lead a life of compassion. So we want to make sure that in advocating for books about other communities, that we are also aware that this is going to inherently benefit the Sikh community and vice versa. In terms of what really is at stake, I think the greatest resource that I can point to right now, and I'll share a link in the chat shortly, is our recently published school climate report called Where Are You Really From? We published this report in April after surveying more than 2,006 students ages 9 to 18. And in this study, we have found that almost 8 in 10 sixth students have experienced a bullying incident in the past year at school. That half of sixth students surveyed believe that educational materials, holiday policies, uniform policies are not at all inclusive of their religious tradition. We're also hyper aware of the fact that young Sikh boys, particularly those who wear religious head coverings like patkas and dastars, are much more likely to be bullied in school. And a huge reason for this is the lack of representation of Sikh stories and Sikh characters in our books. And the censorship of these books is threatening that even further. So I'll stop there. I know I shared a little more than I probably should have in this moment, but thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to answer your questions.
Thank you, Harmeet. I know that there's probably folks that are really interested in learning how that they can take action, and I think there's probably two strands that I'm seeing in the chat. So I think folks probably want to know how they can advocate for this, particularly this state legislation, and then also what do people do on the local level, right? If they're seeing one of their schools or one of their school libraries or public libraries is under threat. And I know that it can happen really all of a sudden, right? So who on the call wants to maybe, Mary, do you want to go into maybe what people can do about the legislation, about advocating for the legislation?
Yes, I can address that. We have a petition that I put in the chat. We've been working with a group called Every Library, and they host a number of petitions related to library topics. They are hosting the Freedom to Read petition, and they will push that petition out to their mailing list also. So that's one easy way to connect with legislators. We also, I believe I don't know, maybe I didn't put this in the chat, but I sent it to you, Jeff. There, our webpage, njasl.org. We have a drop down for intellectual freedom for book challenges. So if you are seeing an issue in your local school, there is information on that webpage where you can ask for support or report the challenge. And we have, in fact, one of our members is on the call today, Amy Penwell. She has a group called the Regional Response Team. And that group then will provide support for the librarian or the teacher in the district, and help to mobilize, to write letters if needed, to gain some community support. And this is where Sweep NJ has also been very helpful. They've been showing up at school board meetings when there have been issues. So those are some things that you can do to promote the legislation. I also shared some social media graphics with Jeff that he can share out, and has some simple talking points, because we have been trying to be consistent with the language that we're using when we're promoting the bill.
And Mary, what do you think has been the most effective talking point that really you think has helped people understand why this bill is so important?
I think it's important when people share their personal stories. It makes a difference when if a student is willing to get up and share their story. If you as an adult have a story, if something happened to you, I think we all probably remember a book that had a tremendous impact. Like, as you were talking today, I think of some of the things that I read as a teenager that resonated with me. I grew up in a very white suburban community. And some of the stories that I read, the story of Malcolm X, Farewell to Manazar. I mean, those opened my horizon to a different world. You know, that helped me develop empathy for other people other than I grew up with in my little white community. Um, so I think sharing those stories, those personal stories are, you know, impactful. I mean, that's how the bill was created. You know, Senator Zwicker heard Martha's story and was inspired to like do something about it. Like, this is not acceptable that one of our New Jersey residents is treated because of trying to do her job.
Mary, if I there, I had the for the Freedom to Read bill, which was frightening, but one of the proudest moments I've had as president of NJSL. But what touched me was, I think there was an 11-year-old who sat up front in the same seat I sat in, and said, I'm important, you know, and I will always remember that. And I really do think the bravery shown by lots of students, it really shows that we need to have these books. And sometimes it does take that personal story for someone who's on the fence about this topic. If you hear one of these personal stories, it's hard not to recognize the importance of the freedom to read. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mary.
No, that's a really good idea, and I think that is, I know that we have several folks from AAPI New Jersey on the call, and I'm thinking like we should maybe solicit stories from our community and create like a story bank, so we have that ready, and maybe from those stories, some of our young people can maybe testify or share their stories with the legislators. Rosalie and Hermie, do you have anything you'd like to share about either what folks can do specifically to promote this legislation, or if they see a threat happening in their community?
Okay. I did put Sweep NJ's Facebook in the chat. I think what it boils down to is it's people want to be able to do something. If you're like Mary said, if it's a librarian and she's being harassed, she needs to tell somebody so that we can help. So that's really, I have so many times, almost every day, our members are, this is happening in my school. What can we do? So we start to mobilize. For example, in Edison last night, the school board is trying to repeal policy 5756, the transgender policy, a student policy. So this is happening all over, and we can't be everywhere, but at least if one or two parents can go together to the board meetings, it makes a difference, because then we know it's like, you're our eyes and ears. We have to know what's happening, because if we don't, then we can't help. We cannot fix it. So we need people to just go to their board meetings, go to commission meetings. I know we didn't talk about the public libraries, but the public libraries are becoming book sanctuaries. If you want to learn about that, I can give you links to that as well. I am going to give you a recent op-ed, but I thought this was interesting. In the op-ed by Guy Citron, who is in Hunterdon, he said, I love the definition of indoctrination, which is what the extremists keep saying librarians are doing, that is the teaching of a belief system. And it resonated with me because it's simple yet profound, because when there are more books, you get a wealth of belief systems. They become available and you can explore and understand. But conversely, with with fewer books, it means it's leading you to a singular belief system, which is again what Project 2025 wants to do. So I really think people have to look at everything on a micro level and then pull back and look at it at a macro level, because then you can understand exactly what's happening. Why is this happening? And try to figure out, well, let me ask somebody how I can help. It really starts with, how can I help?
I'm happy to follow that up. Thank you so much, both Mary and Rosalie, for all of those awesome calls to action. I just want to reiterate from what both of y'all shared, and Beth as well, that showing up to hearings and board meetings is incredibly important. The numbers in the room are important, and your voice and your perspective are really important. As Mary uplifted earlier, we were able to recruit a young 6th student, a 15-year-old student, to testify at the Assembly Education Committee's hearing on the bill. And his testimony was really powerful. And I think it was also a very unique testimony coming from a perspective that most folks don't think about, which is exactly the next point that I wanted to get to, which is that in a lot of cases, especially in public rhetoric around book bans and about the freedom to read, we see a lot of inflammatory rhetoric about queer and trans communities, and about Black communities and critical race theory particularly. And one thing that I have noticed in my work is that every now and then we'll have a community member who asks, like, why are you making such an investment in this work? And I share with them, the reasons that I shared earlier about why it is important for us to not only maintain a pulse on including the Sikh tradition and Sikh community experiences in education curricula and lesson plans, but also making sure that the other sort of elective educational resources that our kids have access to also represent our community, and to keep our communities safer. So I definitely invite folks to have conversations with your neighbors and friends who are not tapped into the campaign so far. If you do have Sikh neighbors and friends, we have developed a targeted action campaign that will very easily allow them to send a pre-populated email to their senator, asking them to support the Senate's Freedom to Read bill. So we want to make sure that we keep up the momentum from Assembly passage, which we are very excited about, and hope that you'll pass this on to your Sikh neighbors, since the language in the letter is Sikh specific. And then the last thing I want to share is the Sikh Coalition's library toolkit. On the very local level, I think it's important to combat the rhetoric around why these book bans are important, quote unquote, by making sure that at your local library, your librarians and community members know that they have access to books by Sikh authors. And if they don't have access to these books, request that these books get added to your library's collection. It is so important to make sure that, on the state level and on the county and district level, we have these conversations and are fighting to make sure that everyone has the freedom to read, that even at your local library on that micro level, you're doing your part to make sure that the collection is inclusive and diverse. And I'm looking at Amy's question in the chat. We do not have local chapters of the Sikh Coalition, but our community development team, which is a small but mighty team, has a very, very wide network of about like hundreds of gurdwaras, houses of worship around the country, and hundreds of Sikh communities around the country, who we have very close community relationships with, who we uplift in these kinds of state and local level campaigns, and who we like to tap into this. So if you have Sikh neighbors who are interested in getting involved, they can send an email to the Sikh Coalition through our website, sikhcoalition.org, and we're happy to help connect them to a community group that we have connections with.
Can I
Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead,
add
Mary.
something?
Oh, Rosalie, sorry.
I did put in the chat the right to be about anti-Asian harassment training. When Hamid was talking about the kids being bullied, I thought I want the AAPI community to know there's resources, and I've taken that training twice. But the first time was when during COVID, and we had our ex-president calling COVID Kung flu, and there was such a rise in hate crimes. It was the very first time in my life. Now, I'm born in New York, so I'm like second generation. But it was the first time in my life that I ever felt afraid that somebody would harm me just by how I looked. So this was such like a visceral feeling for me to just understand that. And I think that it goes back to Mary's discussion about empathy. When I felt that, I realized this is what is happening to the Black community every single day. I mean, we just had a woman shot in her own home yesterday because she called the police for help in Illinois. And it was, I don't know if I suggest you watch the video because I saw it and I was in tears, but we have resources, reach out. It's important. Again, if we pull together as a coalition, as a group, we can get so much done. Gosh, pissed off women, we can get shit done.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I know we're just bumping up against time. So if anyone wants to ask additional questions, feel free to email advocacy@aapi.newjersey.org and we can pass it on. I know there's been a lot of resources that have been shared. We're going to follow up with our panelists to make sure we get that to everyone. And I really want to thank Mary, Rosalie, and Hermit for joining us, and Beth, and the wonderful organizations that are working on this. I'm sure we're going to do more mobilization in the coming weeks and months when the legislature comes back. And we hope that we can push even harder to just get the other side of the legislature to pass it. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Our next Lunch and Learn right now, please feel free to pencil it in. We'll also be following up by email. We're going to be working in partnership with the Latino Action Network Foundation to discuss more about efforts to stop school desegregation. So we're kind of moving forward again in September with the back to school topic. So that'll be on Tuesday, August 20th. At noon, we'll have more information. So I want to thank all of our partners and all of you for joining us, and we hope to see you, offline or at another event. And please keep in touch. Thank you so much.